Hello everyone, in this video I will explain about simple, compound, complex sentence. Here are the content of my presentation. Before we discuss about the topic today, I will remind you about basic sentence elements. Independent clause can stand alone as a sentence. It contains a subject and a verb and is a complete idea. For example, I like spaghetti. He reads many books. I is subject, like is verb, spaghetti is an object. Another is dependent clause. A dependent clause is not a complete sentence. It must be attached to an independent clause to become complete. This is also known as a subordinate clause. For example, although I like spaghetti, or because he reads many books. So those sentences need an independent clause to make it complete. Sentence can consist of independent clause and dependent clause, or independent clause and independent clause. Simply to say, a sentence can consist of more than one clauses. Do you still remember that a sentence consists of subject and verb? Here are the explanation. Subject is a person, animal, place, thing, or concept that does an action. Determine the subject in a sentence by asking the question who or what. I like spaghetti. Who likes spaghetti? He reads many books. Who reads many books? Now, verb. It expresses what the person, animal, place, thing, or concept does. Determine the verb in a sentence by asking the question, what was the action or what happened? Here are the examples. I like spaghetti. He reads many books. The movie is good. The be verb is also sometimes referred to as a copula or a linking verb. It links the subject, in this case, the movie, in the third sentence, to the complement or the predicate of the sentence, in this case, good. Object. Object is a person, animal, place, thing, or concept that receives the actions. Determine the object in a sentence by asking the question, the subject did what? Or to whom? Or for whom? For example, I like spaghetti. What I like? Spaghetti. He reads many books. What I read? Many books. The last one is prepositional phrase. A phrase that begins with a preposition, for example, in, at, for, behind, until, after, of, during, and modifies a word in the sentence. A prepositional phrase answers one of many questions. Here are a few examples. Where, when, in what way? I like spaghetti for dinner. He reads many books in the library. Now, I will explain about English sentence structure. Please pay attention. The following statements are true about sentences in English. A new sentence begins with a capital letter. For example, he obtained his degree. He should be capital letter. A sentence ends with punctuation, a period, a question mark, or an exclamation point. Look at the example below. Next, a sentence contains a subject that is only given once. In the example, there are two subjects, so you need to eliminate one subject to be a good sentence. Next, a sentence contains a verb or a verb phrase. He obtained his degree. A sentence follows subject plus verb plus object with order. Example, he as subject obtained as verb, his degree as an object. And the last one, a sentence must have a complete idea that stands alone. This is also called independent clause. He obtained his degree. Now, let's go further and discuss about simple sentence, compound sentence, complex sentence, and compound complex sentence. First, simple sentence. It contains a subject and a verb, and it may also have an object and modifiers. However, it contains only one independent clause. Here are a few examples. She wrote. She completed her literature review. He organized his sources by theme. They studied APA rules for many hours. Second, compound sentence. A compound sentence contains at least two independent clauses. These two independent clauses can be combined with a comma and a coordinating conjunction or with a semicolon. Here are a few examples. She completed her literature review and she created her reference list. The first clause is independent clause, and the second clause is also independent clause, meaning that both clauses can stand alone. Another example, he organized his sources by theme. Then he updated his reference list. The last one, they studied APA rules for many hours, but they realized there was still much to learn. Next is complex sentence. It contains at least one independent clause and at least one dependent clause. Dependent clauses can refer to the subject, who, which, the sequence time, since, while, or the causal elements because and if of the independent clause. If a sentence begins with a dependent clause, note the comma after this clause. If, on the other hand, the sentence begins with an independent clause, there is not a comma separating the two clauses. Here are a few examples. Although she completed her literature review, comma, she still needed to work on her methods section. The first clause is dependent clause. Although she completed her literature review. After comma is independent clause. She still needed to work on her methods section. Note the comma in this sentence because it begins with a dependent clause. The second example, because he organized his sources by theme, it was easier for his readers to follow. And the last one, they studied APA rules for many hours, as they were so interesting. In the last example, there is no comma in the sentence because it begins with an independent clause. The last discussion is compound complex sentence. Sentence types can also be combined. A compound complex sentence contains at least two independent clauses and at least one dependent clause. For example, she completed her literature review, but she still needs to work on her methods section even though she finished her methods course last semester. Let me highlight the first example for you. She completed her literature review is independent clause. She still needs to work on her methods section is independent clause as well. And then, even though she finished her methods course last semester is dependent clause. In this sentence consists of two independent clauses and one dependent clause. Another example, although he organized his sources by theme, he decided to arrange them chronologically and he carefully followed the meal plan for organization. Next, with pizza and soda at hand, they studied APA rules for many hours, and they decided that writing in APA made sense because it was clear, concise, and objective. Remember, pay attention to comma usage in complex compound sentences so that the reader is easily able to follow the intended meaning.